The night Michael B. Jordan won Best Actor, Dave Chappelle was not in the Dolby Theater. He was on stage at a venue in Ohio, doing a set. Halfway through the night, he stopped the show, pulled out his phone, and played a clip of Jordan's speech for the audience. Then he said something into the microphone that the crowd recorded on their phones, and that spread across the internet by morning. He said that man had just done what I tried to do 23 years ago, and they would not let him. Nobody in that Ohio crowd fully understood what he meant in the moment. The people who laughed assumed it was a bit. The people who got quiet understood it was not. Dave Chappelle walking away from $50 million in 2005 is the most documented case in American entertainment history of a black artist, choosing his own mind over a system designed to absorb everything he created. Jordan winning that award for a film explicitly about that exact dynamic. A film about black artists watching their creations get consumed by something that claims to love them was not a coincidence Chappelle was going to let pass without naming it out loud. What connects these two men is not friendship or industry gossip. It is a pattern. The same pattern ran through Hollywood the same way it ran through the Mississippi Delta in 1932. The names and the decades change. The mechanism does not. And the film Jordan just won for is built entirely on proving that. The man who walked away from everything. In 2005, Dave Chappelle was the highest-paid comedian in television history. Chappelle's show was pulling in over 30 million viewers per episode. Comedy Central offered him $50 million for 2 more seasons. He left the country instead. He flew to South Africa. He did not call his manager first. He gave a single explanation in an interview with Time magazine shortly after. He said a specific sketch had made him feel like the laugh was coming from the wrong place. He had done a sketch in blackface. A crew member laughed. Chappelle said the laugh felt like a racist laugh, and that it made him feel like he was being used to make something harmful dressed up as something funny. He said he was doing work that could be twisted into the opposite of what he intended, and that at $50 million he was being paid specifically not to stop and ask whether that was happening. What followed was not a breakdown. It was a man doing the math and concluding that the money was the mechanism keeping him inside a system that was eating his work. He went to Africa, worked on a farm, came back, and spent years doing small club shows for almost nothing. He rebuilt the distance between himself and the machine by removing the money entirely. The industry did not react with respect. It reacted by spending a decade framing his choice as a psychological collapse. The word crazy appeared in coverage of his departure more than any other single descriptor. He was not credited with clarity. He was pathologized for it. That framing was not accidental, and Chappelle has said as much on record in multiple specials since his Netflix deal began in 2016. He said the system calls you crazy when you see it clearly, because crazy is less threatening than the alternative explanation. What Chappelle saw, and what cost him everything, is the same thing Sinners puts on screen with fangs. What the vampire actually wants, Ryan Coogler did not create Remick, the Irish vampire at the center of Sinners, as a random monster choice. He told the New Yorker Radio Hour that the vampire was specifically chosen because of what a vampire does beyond drinking blood in the film's mythology. In Sinners, a vampire absorbs memories, language, music, the thread connecting a living person to where they came from. Remick is centuries old. He survived British colonization of Ireland. He watched his own culture get systematically hollowed out by an empire that replaced Irish tradition with English institution. He knows precisely what that hollowing costs a people. And he shows up at Club Juke in 1932, Mississippi, and makes an offer to a young black guitarist named Sammy, whose music is the most powerful thing Remick has ever encountered. The offer is this: join me and your music lives forever. Immortality in exchange for control. This is the deal the music industry ran on black artists across the entire 20th century, and Coogler documented this not through metaphor alone, but through historical record. Robert Johnson recorded 29 songs before dying at 27. The copyright to those songs passed through several hands across the following decades, primarily white-owned publishing companies, before eventually being acquired and transferred again. For a significant portion of the 20th century, the financial inheritance of Robert Johnson's work was held by people with no connection to the Mississippi Delta community that produced him. Little Richard publicly stated on record multiple times before his death in 2020 that Pat Boone's version of Tutti Frutti outsold his original because radio programmers at the time preferred to play a white artist's cover over the black original. He said he was told by people in the industry that his style was too wild and that a cleaner version would sell better to a broader audience. He called the people who made that decision thieves without hesitation, and he said it clearly enough that the quote runs in almost every obituary written about him. Chappelle's story about the laugh on set is the same story. He created the material. The machine repackaged what it could use and called the part it could not use a liability. The vampire does not ask for your blood. It asks for the version of you that the machine can distribute. Sammy says no and takes his guitar north. Chappelle took his clarity to South Africa. The mechanism is identical even when the century changes. Why Hollywood calls it crazy? There is a specific and documented phenomenon in American entertainment where black artists who push back on contractual or creative control are described in trade coverage using language that would not be applied to white artists doing identical things. Chappelle named this directly in his 2017 Netflix special Equanimity. He talked about the industry's habit of pathologizing black talent who ask inconvenient questions about ownership and control. He said the word difficult follows a black artist through Hollywood the same way a debt follows a borrower. You get labeled once, and the label travels faster than any correction ever will. Lauryn Hill served prison time for tax issues connected to money she had already paid taxes on. That story received significantly less analysis of its underlying contractual disputes than the legal outcome itself. Prince spent years of his public life writing the word slave on his face and legally changing his name to an unpronounceable symbol to protest a recording contract he described as ownership of his identity. Industry coverage of that period focused almost entirely on whether his behavior was erratic. Very little mainstream coverage in real time asked whether his underlying claim about the contract was accurate. It was. He got his masters back. James Brown, the man credited as the primary architect of funk and the most sampled artist in hip-hop history, died with his estate in legal chaos. The settlement of his estate took nearly 2 decades and went through South Carolina courts multiple times. The delay was not caused by a lack of assets. It was caused by disputes over who actually held rights to those assets. In every one of these cases, the artist who resisted was described in terms of their behavior. The system they were resisting was rarely described at all. Chappelle walked away from $50 million, and the coverage was about his mental state. Almost none of it was about what the $50 million was designed to purchase. When Jordan stood at that microphone and listed Sidney Poitier, Denzel Washington, Halle Berry, Jamie Foxx, Forrest Whitaker, Will Smith by name, he was refusing to let the moment arrive without its lineage. He was doing the same thing Prince did when he put slave on his face. He was insisting that the records show where the thing came from. The contract that changed the story, Coogler's deal with Warner Bros., is not complicated to understand. It is unusual enough that people keep complicating it. He got final cut, meaning no studio interference with the film's ending or content. He got first dollar gross, meaning he gets paid from the first dollar of revenue rather than after the studio subtracts what it calls costs. An accounting method that has historically allowed studios to declare films profitable on paper as net losses. In 2050, the film reverts to him. When the terms leaked, the response from parts of the industry was notable. An anonymous executive called it a threat to the studio system. Coogler pointed out in a public response that Quentin Tarantino had secured ownership provisions in previous deals and that nobody had called those a threat. He said he had his theories about why identical terms generated different reactions depending on who was holding the pen, but he did not elaborate. He did not need to. The $50 million Chappelle walked away from was not a gift. It was a contract for 2 more seasons of a show. Contracts contain terms. The terms Comedy Central held over Chappelle's show included rights to the material. He could not take the show somewhere else. He could not own the archive of what he had built. The $50 million was not payment for his creativity. It was payment for him to stop asking what would happen to that creativity after he delivered it. Coogler sat at a different table 20 years later and negotiated a different outcome. The industry said yes because Sinners had enough leverage by that point that losing the film entirely was a real possibility. But the fact that it required that level of leverage to secure what any artist should reasonably expect to own of their own work is the entire argument both men have been making in different formats for decades. Dave Chappelle said on stage in Ohio that Jordan did what he tried to do. He was not talking about acting. He was talking about the contract. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What gets lost when you do not own it? There is a museum in Clarksdale, Mississippi called the Delta Blues Museum. It exists because enough people cared to build institutional memory for something that was almost completely stripped of its institutional context during the decades it was being commercially distributed. Robert Johnson's voice exists on recordings made in 1936 and 1937, inside a San Antonio hotel room and a Dallas office building. The recordings were made by Don Law for the American Record Corporation. Johnson was paid a flat session fee. He never received royalties. The recordings were bought, sold, licensed, and compiled into collections that generated significant revenue across the following 80 years. Columbia Records released a boxed set in 1990 that won a Grammy for Best Historical Album. Johnson had been dead for 52 years. The music industry did not invent this extraction model. It inherited it from a longer American tradition of taking the cultural production of Black communities and redistributing the economic benefit elsewhere. Coogler traced this in the research that built Sinners. He told the New Yorker Radio Hour that Amiri Baraka's Blues People was essential reading for the script. Blues People, published in 1963, is an explicit argument that the blues is not entertainment. It is the record of a people's interior life under conditions designed to destroy that interior life. Taking the music without taking the history is taking a photograph of a wound and calling it art. Chappelle's show reruns still air on Comedy Central. Chappelle has publicly stated he receives nothing from those airings. He has asked fans not to buy the DVD sets. He made those requests because the contract he signed gave Comedy Central the right to keep airing the show indefinitely. He created it. He does not own it. Every time it airs, the economic benefit flows to the entity that held the contract, rather than to the man whose specific, unrepeatable mind produced the thing. This is not a controversial factual claim. It is in the public record. It is exactly what the vampire in Sinners is doing when it offers Sammy immortality in exchange for control. The music lives forever. The musician hands over what made the music his. The awards room and the room he left behind. Best Actor going to Michael B. Jordan for Sinners is not just a career achievement. It is a specific event inside a specific cultural moment that connects directly to a 23-year-old story about a man who saw the machine clearly enough that he flew to Africa to get away from it. The Academy has given Best Actor to a Black man 6 times in its nearly 100-year history. Sidney Poitier in 1964, Denzel Washington in 2002, Jamie Foxx in 2005, Forrest Whitaker in 2007, Will Smith in 2022, Jordan in 2026. 6 times. The same award has been given to white men over 100 times across the same period. Jordan named all 5 of his predecessors on stage by name because the number is small enough to name. That is the point. Chappelle stood in Ohio and played the clip and said that man did what I tried to do 23 years ago, and they would not let him. The "they" is not a documented institutional pattern with public record evidence across every decade of American entertainment history from the moment commercial recording began. The pattern is not invisible. It just rarely gets named from the main stage by the person holding the award. Jordan named it. Coogler wrote a $200 million film about it and negotiated a contract that gives the film back to him in 2050. Chappelle lost $50 million seeing it clearly and has spent 20 years talking about what he saw from smaller stages with nobody between him and the audience. These are three men across 3 different decades and 3 different industries within the same industry, arriving at the same understanding from different directions. The creative work of Black artists in America has historically been separated from the economic and institutional structures built on top of it. The mechanism for doing this has changed its surface features across generations. The mechanism itself has not changed. The thing that does not get taken. Papa Legba does not take anything at the crossroads. This is the corrected history at the center of Sinners. He watches you decide what you are willing to carry through the door. He is a gatekeeper, not a thief. The theft came later, in the rebranding of the gatekeeper as something evil, which then justified treating everything connected to him as suspect. The blues got called devil's music. Then it got sold as American music. Then it got sampled and rebuilt and sold again as something else. At every stage of that process, the attribution moved further from the Mississippi Delta, and the economic benefit followed the attribution wherever it went. The original gatekeeper's name was changed so the door could be redrawn with someone else holding the key. Coogler is getting that door back in 2050. Chappelle got his clarity in 2005 and has been talking from it every year since. Jordan stood in the Dolby Theater and cried and listed the names because he had spent over a year living inside the full history of what those names represent. Not just as actors who won an award, but as men who created inside a system specifically structured to take from the act of creation. The Sammy in Sinners takes his guitar north. He shows up in the post-credits in 1992, old, still playing, no compromise in sight. Buddy Guy plays him. The music survived entirely intact because Sammy refused to hand the thread over to something that would have made it immortal by making it no longer his. Dave Chappelle left $50 million on a table in 2005, and the music is still entirely his. What he said from that Ohio stage about Jordan was not just recognition. It was one man who paid the full price pointing at another man who just proved the price was worth paying. The mechanism has not changed. The response to it has. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.